Hi, it's Katrina. Number 8. The Lost Amazonian Society. For the past couple of centuries, experts assumed the Amazon jungle wasn't a place where civilization flourished. Among scientists, it was agreed that the Amazon was only hospitable to small communities. They thought nobody lived in the jungle except nomadic hunters and gatherers. However, new research is proving the old hypothesis wrong. Scientists have discovered a vast landscape that was manipulated by an urban society 1,500 years ago. Using light detection and ranging technology to scan the jungle in Bolivia, researchers found evidence of a lost civilization. This civilization was big, and researchers are calling it the Casarabe Society. The laser scans of the jungle revealed huge structures and massive cities that were built between 500 and 1400 AD. The Casarabe lived at the frontier of the Amazon, and their cities were big enough to rival the towns and villages of medieval Europe. This wasn't deep in the jungle, though. It was in the savanna floodplains along its edges. Researchers scanned an area of about 1,700 square miles. The scans allowed them to identify pyramids, terraces, and the remnants of settlements. Many of these monumental structures were built from mud brick, with the cities connected through complex water canals. There were raised highways and crop irrigation, and according to Mark Robinson from the University of Exeter, the sophistication of these people was on par with the better-known civilizations of the Andes Mountains, like the Inca. The craziest part is that all these cities are gone. Yes, they had monumental buildings and massive pyramids, but they've all been destroyed or swallowed by the jungle. They were only identifiable because of the lasers scanning the ground, revealing where the structures once stood. Nobody knows what happened to the civilization. They were amazingly advanced and obviously fantastic architects, yet they vanished and left almost nothing of themselves behind. And now for number 7. But first, I want to give a big shout out to Emmanuel, Xavier, and Buzzin' Along. I'm so glad that this channel is part of your daily routine. Thanks so much for watching and supporting Origins Explained. We wouldn't be here without you. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join the family. Number 7. The Secret Bosnians. There is a giant stone sphere in the European country of Bosnia that's been a source of great mystery for years. The enormous sphere is partially buried in the forest, looking like a giant polished cannonball. According to archaeologist Semir Osmanagich, often called the Bosnian Indiana Jones, this sphere was made by a previously unknown civilization. Semir believes the nameless civilization lived in this forested part of Bosnia over 1,000 years ago. He says they dominated the lands of the Visoko Valley, but their towns and cities are all buried. Other scientists are calling Semir crazy. Mainstream geologists claim the giant stone sphere is natural. They say it's something called a concretion. A concretion is formed naturally over many thousands of years as small mineral particles stick together. The small particles gather around a central core, sealing like cement as they gradually form a larger and larger sphere. Considering the size of the one in Bosnia, it likely took millions of years to make. Just imagine a snowball growing bigger as it rolls down a hill, except this one doesn't move and is made of tiny specks of rock. However, the geologists might not be right. In Costa Rica, the spheres of the Tartessos people are identical to the Bosnian sphere, only a little smaller, and they were made from a type of volcanic rock called gabbro. This is important because volcanic rock doesn't naturally form into a perfect spherical shape. In the case of the stone spheres of Costa Rica, they were made deliberately by an extinct civilization that thrived in the jungle. The stones were placed in perfect rows, with many of them found near confusing petroglyphs. Some weigh up to 15 tons, with experts having no explanation for how they were transported. The jury is still out on the Bosnian sphere. Scientists are divided and will likely stay that way. But what do you think? Was the humongous stone orb crafted by human hands? Or is it nature's handiwork? Number 6. The People of the Sahara. A team of scientists from the University of Leicester in England just discovered evidence of a lost civilization in the Sahara, specifically in the Libyan section of the Sahara Desert. The team used satellite images to identify over 100 forgotten farms and villages. They also discovered several structures that may have been castles, abandoned towns, and fortifications at one point in time. Project leader David Mattingly described the discovery as someone coming to England and suddenly finding new medieval castles. It's utterly baffling, especially the scale of it. Hundreds of structures were built by an unknown civilization here roughly 2,000 years ago. David is a professor of Roman archaeology, and his interest in Libya has to do with the fall of the Roman Empire and its destruction in Libya. However, the structures he and the team found weren't from the Romans at all. They were from a civilization you've likely never heard of before, the Garamantes. The presence of the castles and villages proves the Garamantes were a significant society. But if that's the case, what happened to them? Because the structures were found so deep in the Sahara, it's tough to investigate them. But being in such a hot and inhospitable place does have its archaeological benefits. The structures have remained relatively intact, even if partially swallowed by sand dunes. And many of the castles still have walls standing 13 feet tall. Amazingly, satellite images show irrigation systems that would have brought water and crops to the desert. The Garamantes were so smart that they turned the Sahara into a paradise. In an ancient Roman text, they're described as nothing but barbaric nomads. So the Romans were clearly lying. Sadly, researchers still don't know what caused their civilization to collapse. The Garamantes likely played a huge part in the trans-Saharan trade. They would have had towns in the desert oases throughout the Sahara, but for an unknown reason, their civilization dried up about 1,500 years ago, around the same time that Rome fell. Number 5. Lost Miami. Scientists recently made a groundbreaking archaeological discovery in downtown Miami, of all places. A development group was planning to build a trio of residential towers. But before they could start, archaeologists had to go over the site. And that was when they found evidence of a civilization that lived in Miami 7,000 years ago. Long before there were skyscrapers and paved roads, there was a culture that thrived in the prehistoric jungle of Florida. The archaeologists found tools, weapons, and the remains of structures, and they also found human bones. Everything points to an extensive civilization that made downtown Miami their home. And what's even more incredible is that the civilization year predates the supposed cradle of life in Mesopotamia by at least 1,000 years. Because Miami is so modern and the city isn't about to be torn down and excavated, researchers have no idea how advanced the civilization was. They could have had palaces, temples, and pyramids, but there isn't any real way to know unless all of Miami is demolished. There is another interesting site nearby in the Biscayne Bay known as the Miami Circle. It's between 2,000 and 3,000 years old and was likely created by the Tequesta tribe. Scientists don't know if it was the same tribe who built the settlement that was just found, or if it was an older, more advanced group. Scientists and members of the public have made appeals to the city of Miami to stop any building on the new site. But these appeals have been met with distaste and indifference. There are hundreds of millions of dollars on the line, so who knows what will happen. Sadly, though, it's looking like the truth of the mystery civilization may be buried once again. Number 4. A mystery in India. In India, archaeologists have reportedly found the remnants of a lost civilization in a national park. Within Bandhavgarh Park, researchers uncovered artificial bodies of water and ancient paintings. Amazingly, they've identified human activity and religious structures from thousands of years ago. According to the Archaeological Survey of India, or ASI for short, the area was part of a trading route. An unknown group of people lived here 1,500 years ago. They carved caves for weary travelers to rest in, then grew prosperous from the merchants. They created massive artificial lakes, which were likely used for either agriculture or fishing. And researchers even believe that the people here were extremely skilled and sophisticated. The mysterious civilization isn't particularly ancient. They likely established themselves in the region about 1,800 years ago, at the peak of the Roman Empire. Then, over the next 300 years, they thrived in obscurity. Archaeologists have found either Hindu or Buddhist structures, but it's hard to tell because they're in ruins. But there are several giant monoliths of Lord Vishnu. There's no debating that Bandhavgarh National Park was home to a fully functioning society, but like so many other lost civilizations, they disappeared. They were obviously modern for their time, able to shape the land to their will. But then they departed long enough ago that their splendid works of art and architecture have been mostly destroyed by the ever-growing forest. Number 3. The Underground People. In Kansas, a teenager recently helped discover a lost civilization from the 16th century. The metropolis was found in Arkansas City, a massive place where an estimated 20,000 Wichita Native Americans lived before the arrival of Europeans. The city is called Exeter, which translates to the Great Settlement in English, and it was likely the second biggest city in the U.S. before the 1600s. It was also the site of an epic battle between Spanish conquistadors and Native Americans in 1601. In the chronicles written by the Spaniards, they were baffled by the size of Exeter. According to Wichita State University archaeologist Donald Blakesley, the Spanish counted over 2,000 houses, and each one was home to about 10 people. But that was only a rough estimate. It supposedly took 3 days to walk from one end of the city to the other. Despite its size, though, it was still overwhelmed and destroyed by the Spanish. Adam Ziegler was the teenager who helped with the recent discovery. He found a small iron cannonball that was linked to the battle in 1601. This was one of the cannonballs fired at the city by the Spaniards until the Wichita warriors fled in fear and confusion. The Spaniards essentially firebombed the city until the warriors had no choice but to abandon it. Then the Spanish built their own structures over the ruins, and Exeter was forgotten. What's amazing is that such a huge city was so effectively erased from the planet. It makes you wonder if some of the Native American legends about a secret subterranean city are true. The Apache, Pueblo Indians, the Hopi, and countless other tribes spoke of their ancestors emerging from an underground world. According to many native creation myths, their people emerged from a subterranean city following a great cataclysmic event, likely a flood. But could such a city have been erased just like Exeter, buried somewhere in the continental United States? Or could it still be around somewhere, preserved beneath modern city streets or buried under a mountain? Unfortunately, nobody knows for sure. Number 2. Lost Guatemala. A lost civilization has been found in Guatemala. Archaeologists recently found the ruins of a Maya civilization from the pre-classical period, and they lived a staggering distance from the famous ruins of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. Scientists utilize laser beams to survey the Guatemalan jungle and identify hidden urban structures. They found a monumental web of about 1,000 settlements inside an area of 650 square miles. These settlements all appear to have been connected by an extensive system of roadways. It's like archaeologists found a prehistoric country that was connected by interstates and highways. The reason researchers are calling it a new civilization, even though it's technically part of the Maya, is that they were so far from the other Maya settlements. The distance was so vast that although they were part of the same empire, they had their own culture, kings, and customs. They also disappeared before the Maya in other places. The results of the laser survey showed that this branch of Maya society started around 1000 BC, 3,000 years before today. Then they were gone by 150 AD, which was 700 years earlier than when other major Maya civilizations went extinct. In total, archaeologists identified 110 miles of roadways. The sheer scale of construction suggests a government with a level of sophistication that wasn't seen in many other places at the time. This was an extremely well-organized society, but how they disappeared so much earlier than the rest of the Maya is still a mystery. Number 1. The Tartessos. In Spain 3,000 years ago, a bizarre civilization unlike any other flourished, and they were called the Tartessos People. Some believe they were the descendants of the original people of Atlantis, but others think they were consorting with a race of giants. There are so many wild theories about the Tartessos people, it's hard to separate fact from fiction. Scientists have known about them for a few decades, but they are still pretty new on the scene. And what's exceptionally new is that archaeologists just found the first ever sculptures of human figures made by the Tartessos. There have been sculptures found before, but they always depict giants, plant motifs, or animal-type reliefs. This time, though, the statues are of human faces. And now, scientists have a rough idea of what people physically looked like during the Tartessos' rule. 5 human faces carved from stone were found at the site of Casas del Turunuelo. They date back to the 5th century B.C., which was right at the end of the Tartessos' time in Spain. They only flourished for around 500 years before going the way of the dodo. 2 of the preserved statues were women, while the other 3 are men. But archaeologists can't agree if they are depictions of ordinary humans or gods and goddesses. The Tartessos were hugely complicated people who scientists are struggling to understand. The statues were found inside an adobe temple, and so too were animal bones that had been sacrificed in a ritual. When the ritual was over, the temple was burned to the ground with the statues still inside. This was the weirdest part about the Tartessos. They'd built fantastic cities, beautiful and splendid enough to rival the cities of ancient Greece. Then they burned them to the ground on purpose, and nobody has a clue why they did such a thing. Casas del Turunuelo was only found in 2015, another piece of the unsolved Tartessos puzzle. Experts believe they may have met their end because of a tsunami, which caused their whole civilization to wash away in a flood. If true, it could explain the story of Atlantis. Even respected academics admit that Tartessos civilization could have been the inspiration for the legendary city. Thanks for watching! Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye!